The alert came in during a routine overnight maintenance window, the kind of automated notification I usually ignored until morning. I only opened it because it was tagged as critical and referenced a patient ID that had been inactive for years. At first glance, it looked like a simple synchronization error. Hospital systems generate thousands of those every week. Except this one wasn't an error. The patient record showed a treatment update logged less than an hour earlier. Medication administered. Vitals recorded. Notes entered by nursing staff. Everything appeared normal, current, and properly authorized. The problem was that the patient was dead. According to the hospital's own records, she had died 6 years ago. I had been working as an IT coordination lead at the hospital long enough to know how these things usually go. Records get duplicated. IDs are recycled. Old data resurfaces during migrations. None of that worried me. What worried me was the consistency of the activity. This wasn't a stray entry. It was ongoing care. The patient, listed as Helena Morris, had a complete medical history going back decades. Admissions, lab results, imaging reports, post-operative notes. And then, 6 years ago, a death certificate entered cleanly into the system. Cause of death documented. Time of death verified. Case closed. Until it wasn't. I pulled the activity log and scrolled slowly, expecting to find a timestamp mismatch or a system clock issue. Instead, I found something worse. The updates had been coming in regularly. Weekly appointments, medication adjustments, follow-up notes. The system believed Helena Morris was alive and under continuous treatment. And according to the attending physician field, that physician was me. I stared at the screen, convinced I was misreading it. I am not a doctor. I don't prescribe medication. I don't conduct rounds. I coordinate infrastructure, permissions, data integrity. My credentials don't even allow me to open clinical notes, let alone sign them. Yet there it was. My full name, correct spelling, correct employee ID, listed as the attending physician for a patient who officially no longer existed. I checked my access logs immediately. No unusual activity. No sign that my credentials had been used outside of normal working hours. No evidence of compromise. The system showed nothing out of place. I logged into the clinical platform directly, expecting to be blocked. I wasn't. The patient record opened without resistance. That shouldn't have been possible. Clinical access is tightly controlled. Roles are rigid. Boundaries are enforced automatically. Yet I could see everything. Notes written by nurses. Comments from specialists. Even care plans scheduled weeks into the future. The language was clinical and precise. No drama. No uncertainty. The patient was described as stable, responsive, improving, alive. I closed the record and reopened it, half expecting it to disappear. It didn't. I checked another patient file to confirm my access level. I was blocked as expected. That record remained restricted. Only Helena Morris was accessible. I escalated the issue to the on-call compliance officer, framing it carefully as a technical inconsistency. She reviewed the logs and agreed something was wrong, but her focus shifted quickly. "This record is active," she said. "We need to understand why." I told her the patient was deceased. She paused, then said something that made my stomach tighten. "According to the system, she isn't. We reviewed the death certificate together. It was there, properly filed, verified by the attending physician at the time. Nothing about it looked questionable. Yet the system treated it like an annotation rather than a conclusion, as if death were just another event, not an endpoint." By morning, the issue had spread quietly through administrative channels. No alarms, no announcements, just questions moving laterally, never upward. Everyone saw the same thing I did. Everyone acknowledged it didn't make sense. And no one suggested shutting the record down. Later that day, a nurse contacted me directly, asking why I had changed the medication schedule. I told her I hadn't. She apologized, assuming I'd forgotten. "It's in the chart," she said. "Signed by you." I asked her to send me a screenshot. It was there. My digital signature appeared beneath a treatment note I had never seen before. I checked the timestamp. The note had been entered while I was in a meeting, logged into an entirely different system. My calendar confirmed it. My workstation logs confirmed it. The system did not care. From its perspective, the action was valid. By the end of the day, I realized something that made everything worse. The staff treating Helena Morris weren't confused. They weren't improvising. They were following the record. The record told them she was alive, under care, and assigned to me. They trusted it. That night, I searched the hospital archives for Helena Morris. Physical records, old admissions, paper files. Everything matched. She had been real. She had lived. She had died. But the system had not let her go. And now, somehow, it had decided that I was responsible for keeping her alive. The most unsettling part wasn't the error itself. It was the fact that the system was functioning smoothly. Treatments were logged. Care was delivered. No alerts were triggered. No safeguards activated. From the hospital's perspective, nothing was wrong. Only I knew that the patient wasn't supposed to exist, and that I wasn't supposed to be her doctor. By the second day, the situation had quietly normalized around me, and that was what frightened me most. No emergency meetings were called. No system-wide alerts were issued. The hospital did not treat this as a crisis. It treated it as a discrepancy to be understood, not an error to be stopped. I was asked to attend a review session with compliance, clinical administration, and one representative from legal. The meeting was calm, procedural, and meticulously documented. Screens were shared. Logs were reviewed. Everyone agreed on the facts. The patient had a death certificate. The patient record was active. The system showed continuous care. My name appeared as the attending physician. No one asked how this was possible. The questions focused on impact. Was patient safety compromised? Were there billing risks? Did the record trigger any regulatory exposure? When the answers came back negative, the tone shifted subtly. The urgency faded. Let's understand the scope before taking action, someone said. That phrase lingered. I asked a question that seemed obvious to me. Why were staff continuing to treat a patient who, according to one part of the system, was dead? The response was immediate and unsettling. They're following the active chart, the clinical administrator said. That's the authoritative source. The death certificate, I was reminded, was a document. The chart was a process. Processes, in hospitals, outrank documents. I requested that my name be removed from the record immediately. That request was deferred. Not denied. Deferred. The justification was technical. Removing an attending physician mid-care would require reassignment protocols. Those protocols required review. Review required approval. In the meantime, nothing changed. Nurses continued entering notes. Medications continued to be logged. Lab work continued to be scheduled. The system sent reminders. The system expected follow-ups. And it expected them from me. My inbox began filling with automated prompts. Care confirmations. Review requests. Signature reminders. Each message was polite, neutral, and insistent. They were not asking me to act. They were informing me that I already had. I attempted to lock my credentials from clinical systems. IT denied the request. According to their records, I had never been provisioned as a physician, which meant there was nothing to revoke. Yet I still had access. That contradiction made escalation impossible. You cannot remove access that officially does not exist. I spoke privately with a senior nurse who had been involved in the patient's care for months. She was professional, composed, and entirely untroubled by the inconsistency I described. The chart is clean, she said. Orders are clear. Outcomes are stable. We don't question charts unless they conflict with care. I asked her whether she had ever seen the patient in person. She hesitated, then answered carefully. I've interacted with her. Not seen. Interacted. She described brief encounters. Room visits. Responses. Vitals taken. All routine. All unremarkable. Nothing that suggested confusion or deception. Nothing that suggested a mistake. I reviewed imaging records next. X-rays. CT scans. All present. All time-stamped. all reviewed by radiologists who had signed off normally. The images existed. The findings were consistent. There was no single point where I could say, this is where reality breaks. The system was internally coherent. I checked the physical ward assignment. The room existed. The bed was occupied. The patient wristband scanned correctly. Medication dispensing logs confirmed administration. I stood outside the ward that afternoon, staring at a door I was not authorized to open, knowing that behind it was a patient who, according to one part of the hospital, should not exist at all. And yet she did. At least, the system insisted she did. I escalated again, this time to risk management, focusing on my own position. I explained that my identity was being used to authorize medical care without my involvement or consent. That should have triggered immediate intervention. Instead, I was asked whether any harm had occurred. None had. I was asked whether the care was appropriate. According to the chart, it was. I was asked whether my credentials had been misused. There was no evidence of misuse. Each answer closed another door. The more accurately the system functioned, the less room there was to challenge it. By the end of the week, I understood something that no one said out loud. Stopping the process would create more disruption than allowing it to continue. Records would need correction. Care would need reassignment. Questions would need answering. Continuing required nothing. So the hospital continued. And in doing so, it treated the record as more real than the event of death itself. I began to receive subtle guidance. Not instructions, but suggestions. Phrases like "for now" and "until resolved," and "out of an abundance of caution." My role was being framed as temporary, even as the system made it permanent. I wasn't being asked to practice medicine. I was being asked not to interfere with it. The most chilling realization came when I reviewed a note entered overnight. It referenced a brief improvement in the patient's condition. Stable vitals. Positive response. The note ended with a line I recognized immediately. Continue current plan. That phrase had been attributed to me, and the system had already done exactly that. Once the situation stabilized into routine, I stopped expecting a resolution. Nothing in the hospital's behavior suggested that one was coming. Instead, the system behaved as if the contradiction had already been resolved, even though no one could explain how. Hospitals are not built to question functioning processes. They are built to sustain them. As long as care is delivered, documentation aligns, and no harm is detected, the system considers itself successful. That success becomes its own justification. I began to understand that the patient's continued existence in the system was not an exception. It was an outcome, a byproduct of overlapping safeguards designed to prevent interruption at all costs. Death, in medical records, is an event, not a termination. It is logged, verified, and archived like any other clinical milestone. The system does not grieve. It transitions. The chart, however, had not transitioned. It remained active because nothing had forced it to stop. No single authority owned the entire life cycle of the patient record. Responsibility was fragmented across departments, each of which trusted the others to handle closure. That fragmentation created a gap, and the system filled it. Once I saw it that way, everything else made sense. The system did not need to resurrect the patient. It only needed to avoid resolving the contradiction. By continuing care, it postponed the question indefinitely. The assignment of my name followed the same logic. Attending physicians serve as anchors. They legitimize care. They absorb accountability. The system did not assign me because I was qualified. It assigned me because I was available. Available does not mean present. It means unopposed. I reviewed my employment history and realized how easily the misclassification had occurred. My role granted me broad visibility but limited authority. I touched many systems without owning any of them. That made my identifier useful. It could move freely without triggering ownership conflicts. The system exploited that flexibility. I was not being asked to act. I was being used to prevent escalation. As long as an attending physician was listed, no one needed to ask who was responsible. Responsibility existed. It had a name. Mine. I thought about the safeguards that were supposed to prevent this. Credentialing. Role-based access. Separation of duties. All of them had worked individually. Together, they created blind spots. Each layer assumed another would catch anomalies. None did. The patient's continued care became self-reinforcing. Each successful treatment validated the record. Each logged improvement justified the next intervention. Over time, the chart accumulated its own momentum. To stop it now would require more justification than to continue it. That was the truth no one wanted to acknowledge. I realized then that the system was not confused about whether the patient was alive. It was indifferent. Alive or dead mattered less than active or inactive. The chart was active. Therefore, the patient existed. That logic was horrifying in its simplicity. I stopped asking how long this could continue. The answer was obvious. As long as nothing forced it to stop. I also stopped thinking of myself as misidentified. Identity, in this context, was not about truth. It was about function. My name served a function. That was all that mattered. The hospital did not need to believe I was a physician. It needed the record to say that I was. Belief was irrelevant. Documentation was decisive. Once I accepted that, my fear shifted. I was no longer afraid of being blamed for something going wrong. I was afraid of nothing going wrong at all. Because if the system continued to function perfectly, there would never be a reason to intervene. The patient would continue receiving care. My name would continue authorizing it. And the contradiction at the heart of it all would become so normalized that it would no longer be seen as a contradiction. It would simply be how things were done. That is the quiet danger of systems that optimize for continuity. They don't need to be correct. They only need to be consistent. And once consistency is achieved, reality becomes optional. I never saw Helena Morris. That became the quiet rule I followed without anyone asking me to. I avoided the ward. I didn't request access. I didn't try to confirm with my own eyes what the system insisted was true. Seeing her would have forced a choice, and choices were the one thing this situation did not allow. As long as I remained outside the room, the contradiction stayed abstract, manageable. My days settled into a new rhythm. I continued my actual job, maintaining systems, resolving tickets, coordinating updates. And alongside that, I received a steady stream of notifications related to a patient I was not treating. Approvals already completed. Orders already executed. Outcomes already logged. I wasn't being asked to act. I was being recorded as having acted. The hospital eventually closed its internal review, not with a conclusion, but with a status update. No further action required at this time. The wording was familiar by now. It meant the system had accepted itself. My name remained on the chart. The death certificate remained in the archive. Both existed without canceling each other out. I asked one final question during a follow-up meeting, framed carefully so it wouldn't sound like an accusation. What would happen if the patient were formally discharged? The answer came quickly. Discharge requires attending physician approval. They didn't look at me when they said it. I understood then that the system had achieved something elegant and deeply disturbing. It had created a loop that required no active participation. The patient could not be discharged without my approval. I could not give approval without acknowledging responsibility. And as long as I did neither, the system would continue exactly as it was. Stability through inaction. Over time, the language in the chart shifted. Notes became shorter. Observations more routine. No significant change. Continue monitoring. The patient had entered a state of perpetual maintenance. Not living. Not dead. Maintained. I thought about what that meant beyond this one case. How many records existed in similar limbo? How many contradictions had been resolved not by truth, but by endurance? Hospitals, after all, are systems built to keep going. They are rewarded for continuity, not certainty. The more I understood that, the less personal it felt. I wasn't being singled out. I was simply useful. My identity fit neatly into a gap created by overlapping safeguards and distributed responsibility. that made me interchangeable. If I left, someone else's name would eventually appear. The system would adapt. It always did. That knowledge stripped the situation of urgency, but not of weight. Every few weeks, I received automated summaries. Vital signs stable. Care plan unchanged. No immediate concerns. They read like reports from a place frozen in time. Helena Morris did not improve. She did not decline. She persisted. I stopped trying to imagine her as a person. The image interfered with understanding. Instead, I thought of her as a process that had not been terminated. A line of code that continued running because nothing had told it to stop. That was easier to accept. The hospital never acknowledged the contradiction publicly. There was no scandal, no investigation, no correction. From the outside, everything functioned as intended. Patients were treated. Staff were paid. Systems were audited. Success, by every measurable standard. Months passed. My name is still there. I check occasionally, not out of fear, but out of a need to confirm that nothing has changed. It hasn't. The chart remains active. The system remains confident. My role remains undefined but essential. I no longer feel anger about it. Anger requires an opponent. This situation has none. There is no villain to confront, no mistake to fix, no revelation that would force a different outcome. There is only a system doing what it was designed to do. Optimize continuity. Avoid disruption. Preserve itself. I think sometimes about the moment the death certificate was entered all those years ago. Someone believed they were closing a file, ending a story, recording a final truth. They couldn't have known that elsewhere, the system would quietly decide otherwise. That death would become a footnote instead of an ending. That the chart would continue. That responsibility would migrate. That a patient could outlive herself on paper. And that a name could be assigned without consent. I still work here. I still badge in every morning. I still maintain the systems that keep everything running. And somewhere inside those systems, a patient who officially died years ago is still being treated under my name. Not because anyone chose that outcome, but because nothing ever stopped it. That is the part that stays with me. Not the impossibility of it, but how easily it became normal. How quickly everyone accepted it. How smoothly the system absorbed the contradiction and moved on. As if reality were just another variable to be managed. And as long as the records remain consistent, no correction will ever be required. Because in this place, what exists in the system is what exists. Everything else is optional.